Mr. Mayor, distinguished guests, it should say, aware of Wielden Coile, is Sian Ushla, to Firkin Ohasar and Valley, Fakasar Mahan Hinder Sun, Mavan Kele Siat Sun, a toy Tiastalam, Mr. Sun Winton Herin, Quinage Rime Daran, Vehan shall live in Kohar, Ossa, Galantasha. Mr. Mayor and distinguished guests and members of the Council, may I first of all thank you for your kind welcome, and I just want to say how much I can applaud your very fine speech and its very fine principles. On this state visit, we've had an opportunity of having wonderful discussions with the President of Portugal, with the new government of Portugal, with many members of the Portuguese society. But I was very anxious to make, as it were, a visit to another city out of Lisbon, conscious as I am of the competitive spirit that is at the heart of Portugal. You will have been told already that I have visited one of the several famous soccer clubs on the night of my arrival, but we will not discuss this. I think it is very moving for me to hear you make reference to the 14th century, because indeed that is the period in which the city of Galway had, as you say, a monopoly on the wine trade. I had the privilege of being mayor of Galway twice, in 1981 and 1991. That time of the wine trade was interesting. It also led to the foundation of some of the first banks on the European continent, and the Kirwan trade, and the Kirwan family and others are associated with the wine trade. We have to tell you that in relation to the competition between cities and as much as the competition between soccer clubs, the great commercial centre moved from Galway on the west coast to Cork on the south coast. And 200 years later, it is Cork that you find trading most successfully with the continent. There has been, of course, long before that, and I think very near this city here is a Celtic settlement, reminding us of even older connections between peoples who who set their faces to the sea and who moved with mixing their different languages as well along the edges of the Atlantic. I think that this position of our peoples facing the Atlantic is not a disadvantage at all in relation to our connections to Europe, because if we sent people to sea and looked outwards to the greater world, both of our peoples, in tasks of discovery, it gave us the legacy of being both of us migrant people. And yet if the proportion of our population living abroad always exceeded those living at home, it has created something quite valuable today, a consciousness and an understanding of being able to put the migrant experience at the heart of our moral sentiments and our policies and our approaches. I think then too, it is true of both of our peoples that we also looked in the other direction, and we have always been enthusiastic Europeans. Indeed, you mentioned the 16th century, which is one of the most difficult times in Ireland, where we are prohibited from belief systems, our own belief system, our cultural system, and in which we are not allowed to conduct scholarship. And it was to Portugal that particularly a number of young men originally came, locating themselves, those, for example, who studied for the priesthood, but many others as well who are working on manuscripts. That scholarly, intellectual connection is a very, very old one. And then it is from that departure point as well, you see very significant partnerships emerging of both Portuguese and Irish scholars heading out to the wider world. So therefore our peoples and our cities, and this city, have always embraced the world as a set of opportunities. And indeed, one of the reasons I was very anxious to visit today was, of course, that I will have an opportunity of visiting new expressions of innovation and the application of science through technology, addressing great issues, which is something we do. When you have countries with smaller populations, indeed you have put the word, I think, in relation to the development of smart cities. Urbanization is the biggest problem facing the world at the present time. It cannot be understood like it was in the 1930s or 40s. For example, the great run on cities that is going to take place in Africa. I think that being able to manage cities, embracing science and technology is a whole other area. Would you remind me as I listened to your speech of the importance of realizing the necessary integration between memory and imagination? Those who respect heritage and culture and those who remember morally and ethically are in fact better empowered in relation to take decisions in the present. But very, very importantly, it is the source of what we say in Irish is croitheacht, or creativity, the kind of creativity that enables you to envisage new opportunities. I know, Mr. Mayor, you know very well is that when a person becomes mayor of a city, you have an opportunity not only to hear what one might call the grief of the city, but also to engage with its opportunities. And I think we are all of us who are in the public world, and it is something for which I make a defense since my speeches, since I became President of Ireland, and that is the importance of defending the public world. I very much enjoy being in Parliament, visiting parliaments abroad. I also enjoy very much visiting members of councils. I enjoy public squares. What happens in the public space is what is so incredibly important. So I think that the challenges then facing a mayor are many, but so are the opportunities. And I think it is, as I was very anxious to come to this city, was to hear of new things that are happening, both be it in relation to the automobile industry today, be it in relation to the new technological applications in cities, but also to be able to look back at one of the most famous beverages in the world. And I think this sense of excellence in everything one does, that is very European. I should say, I so much are in agreement with you, Mr. Mayor, as well. The Europe that we are trying now to get back on track is a Europe that is visionary. I reminded and was very much with very much agreement with the President of Portugal and with the Prime Minister of Portugal and the government of the great moment it was in the history of the European Union when we put cohesion side by side with competitiveness, realizing that yes, if we were to trade successfully and efficiently, we could do so with the strength of the support of all of our people. And equally, as we adjusted ourselves institutionally in Europe to take account of exogenous and endogenous movements of a fiscal and financial kind, it was important also that we bring the people into our conversation. And while it might be difficult to forge consensus at times, allowing for a participation of the citizens, creating, as it were, a social integration in Europe that can accompany an institutional integration, but avoiding the gaps that open up between them. And in every speech in recent years, I have been speaking about it wouldn't be a union if we didn't speak of each other with respect and integrity and respecting differences. But neither would it be a successful union if we abandoned our young people to a life without a future in terms of opportunities and so forth. So therefore, in the speeches I've been making, they've been about how it is all possible. It is possible to have all of the prudence and good governance accompanied by the most creative and innovative uses of providing opportunities for our young people. And this can happen, very interesting about the 250,000 population you refer to. It is possible to have tourism develop in an ecologically responsible way, because we're challenged even as we speak at the present time. And we all hope, and it is in all of our thoughts and prayers, that there would be a positive, implementable, accountable outcome from the Paris talks of COP21. We have taken decisions in New York recently in relation to global poverty.
in relation to what, if you like, the elimination of a deepening inequality in our world. And two things that are challenging, Mr. Mayor, that as those of us who have, you are a mayor, I have been a mayor, those of us who are heads of state or whatever, we have to realize that it was a malignant connection between forms of economy, ecology and ethics, a lost ethics, that brought a 4.5 billion old planet to a point of fragility that we're discussing now in Paris. So we have to change our thinking and our consciousness and our decisions. And equal in the same way in New York, as we had 200 heads of state, we realize that we are generations that have failed to eliminate global poverty, failed to eliminate gender violence, failed to eliminate the death of millions of children who need not have died, failed to take responsibility for the environment. I say none of this to be negative at all, but to say is that we gather ourselves together, like our people did before us, to get to a new place, reconnecting ecology, economics, ethics, concentrating in our people, allowing them to move without borders, offering hospitality in a responsible way, knowing the distinction between those who are refugees, those who are migrants, as all of our people were, seeking a better life, and those to whom we must cooperate against to eliminate criminal activity. And all this is very, very, very possible. And what's great, where is at its best? It is at its best when it is in the public square, when people of all ages and all backgrounds and all talents and all of the different things can move together in the public space listening to music. I finished by saying how strongly I agree with you about the importance of culture. I was president of the Council of Culture Ministers of the European Union in 1996. I was the first Irish Minister for Arts, Culture and the Gaelic. But in 1996, I often said to my fellow culture ministers, not all of them agreed, but people like Melina McCurry agreed, and that was, it is at times of economic contraction. You need culture more than ever, because you must give an assurance to your citizens that even if they haven't the money to spend to purchase access to the arts, then is the time when in fact it must be, you must say, well look, if the economy has failed you, or if something has gone wrong in your job, you have lost no other citizenship rights, and certainly not your cultural rights. So therefore that is the time for the public demonstrations in music. It is the time for public art. It is the time for the people getting together. And that's why you are absolutely right. And also when one is speaking of culture, boundaries don't matter. Our musics bounce off each other without boundaries all over the world. In the Erasmus program, that great successful European Union program, our children have gone off and studied with each other. There are 1 million Erasmus babies in Europe. And when we think in many cases about it, I think isn't it the union that we spoke about in the Lisbon Treaty, the union that's in the founding treaties, the union that you speak of, the union that I want, that your new government wants, that your president wants, that those of us want, is a union that isn't one of adjusting our peoples to some abstraction that is unaccountable in a fiscal sense. We say we can be fiscally prudent, but we also can be happy and offer fulfillment to our people. That is why I warmly congratulate you on your very, very fine welcoming speech. And I wish you and all the citizens of your city and your region and all of the people of Portugal every, every success. Gwym ga graag ysbanatari, dan tamatoli tiocht agus nilene avrasara, agus gomen netari le arachtol san tamatoli qui. You will have the benefit of it all in the future. I wish you health, happiness and prosperity, and I once again warmly thank you for the welcome that you have offered, Mr.